Britain was the Industrial Revolution. The factories, mills, and forges of this country truly changed the world. They gave us mass production, the railway, the iron frame, and the skyscraper. And then, one by one, most of them were left to ROT. These are 10 factories that made history. Some have been saved, some were demolished, others are still standing, barely, waiting for someone to decide whether they matter. Battersea Power Station stands as a monument to Britain's electric modernity, a cathedral of brick and steel that once powered a fifth of London. Rising on the south bank of the Thames, its 6 million bricks and 4 iconic chimneys became a defining feature of the capital's skyline. Built in phases from 1929 to 1955, Battersea was not only an engineering marvel but a symbol of national ambition, burning over 1 million tons of coal a year to keep the city's lights blazing. Yet after decades of faithful service, the turbines fell silent in 1983. The station's vast halls, once alive with the hum of generators and the work of thousands, were left exposed to the elements when the roof was stripped away in the 1980s. For nearly 40 years, the site drifted between failed schemes and neglect, its Art Deco shell decaying as planners and speculators argued over its fate. Only in 2022 did the building reopen, transformed by more than £1 billion of private investment into luxury flats, high-end shops, and an Apple campus, with apartments commanding prices upwards of £8 million. The public can now walk the restored turbine halls, but the cost of rescue has been commercialization. Battersea's survival is measured in property values, not in the preservation of working-class memory. It is a rare case where a factory of national importance was saved, but only by turning it into an enclave for the wealthy. The story of Battersea Power Station frames the uneasy balance Britain strikes between pride in its industrial past and the neglect or sale of the places that made that history real. In second place, Shrewsbury Flax Mill malting stands as the quiet origin of the modern skyscraper. Completed in 1797, this unassuming brick complex in Shropshire introduced the world's first iron-framed multi-story building, a structural breakthrough that would echo through the steel skeletons of Chicago and New York a century later. The iron frame allowed factories to rise higher, span wider, and resist fire, shifting the very possibilities of industrial architecture. For nearly 2 centuries, the flax mill powered the local economy, its iron bones supporting generations of textile workers. But as Britain's textile industry faded, the site slipped into silence, closing its doors in 1987. Decades of neglect followed, with the once pioneering structure left to decay behind locked gates. Unlike so many others, however, the flax mill was not lost. In 2005, English Heritage stepped in, purchasing the site and beginning a painstaking publicly funded rescue. Over £28 million was invested to stabilize the iron frame, restore the maltings, and return the buildings to public use. In 2022, the flax mill reopened as a heritage destination and community hub, its iron skeleton now visible and celebrated. Here, public stewardship prevailed where private capital would not, offering a rare example of Britain choosing to honor its industrial origins. Not with luxury flats, but with preservation for all, the flax mill's survival is a testament to what can be achieved when the nation values the places where working lives built the modern world. Third on our list, Chatterley Whitfield Colliery stands as a stark monument to both industrial achievement and national neglect. In 1937, this sprawling site in North Staffordshire became the first coal mine in Britain to extract over 1 million tons of coal in a single year, a feat that powered factories, railways, and homes across the country. At its peak, the colliery headstocks and winding gear marked the skyline, and its labyrinth of tunnels stretched for miles beneath the earth, employing generations of miners from the surrounding communities. But the seams grew thin, and in 1977, production ceased. For a brief period, the site found a second life as a mining museum, drawing visitors underground to witness the scale of Britain's coal heritage. That hope faded quickly. By 1993, the museum closed its doors, and the colliery was left to the elements, its buildings crumbling, metalwork rusting, and shafts filling with water. More than 30 years later, Chatterley Whitfield remains derelict, its future hanging by a thread. Experts estimate that rescuing the site would require well over £100 million, a sum far beyond the reach of local trusts or city councils. In January 2026, heritage campaigners declared an emergency, warning that without urgent intervention, the most complete deep mine complex of its era could be lost forever. The site's scheduled monument status offers little practical protection against collapse. Here, the legacy of industrial greatness teeters on the edge, a reminder that the places where ordinary people labored are the first to be forgotten when the money runs out and national memory turns elsewhere. The Spode factory in Stoke-on-Trent stands as the birthplace of bone china, a material that would come to define English ceramics for over 2 centuries. In the 1790s, Josiah Spode perfected the bone china formula, fusing artistry with industrial process and setting a new global standard for tableware. For 239 years, the Spode Works fired kilns day and night, exporting fine pottery to every corner of the world and employing thousands from the potteries district. The site's Grade 2-star listed buildings with their distinctive bottle kilns became a symbol of both craft and community in the heart of Stoke. Yet by 2008, as demand for British ceramics collapsed and global competition surged, the factory's long run came to a quiet end. The bottle kilns, once the engines of invention and pride, were left derelict, their brick shells crumbling as rain and frost seeped in. The Spode Museum Trust managed to preserve part of the site, but much of the historic works slipped into decay, prompting heritage bodies to sound the alarm. While some Stoke potteries have found new life as museums or working studios, the Spode site remains a stark reminder of how easily national treasures can be sidelined. Here, the legacy of invention and nearly 2.5 centuries of skilled labor now compete with the silence of abandonment, as Britain's industrial heartland weighs the cost of letting its history rot. Number 5, the EMI factory at Hayes redefined what a British factory could be. Not a forge or a mill, but a nerve center for the sound of the 20th century. From 1907, this 58-acre site on the outskirts of London became a magnet for technical ingenuity and musical history. At its peak in the late 1920s, EMI Hayes employed around 7,500 people, pressing records that would travel from working-class living rooms to concert halls across the globe. Here, the Beatles' albums were pressed into vinyl, their grooves cut in rooms that once rang with the machinery of mass production. Pink Floyd, the Rolling Stones, and countless others passed through these halls, their music carried into the world by the hands of ordinary workers. During World War II, the same site turned to radar research and electronics, supporting the Allied war effort with secret innovations that would shape the course of the conflict. Yet the scale and significance of Hayes did not guarantee its survival. As the music industry shifted and vinyl gave way to new formats, production dwindled. In 1995, demolition began. Once stood as the world's largest sewing machine plant, 1.5 miles of brick and glass that transformed a riverside hamlet into a manufacturing powerhouse. Opened in 1885, the Kilbowie Works became the beating heart of the Singer Empire, employing more than 16,000 men and women at its peak. For decades, the rhythmic clatter of machinery marked the days and nights of Clydebank, as the factory supplied 80% of the world's sewing machines. The sheer scale of the workforce dwarfed even the great shipyards nearby, anchoring the town's identity and economy. The Singer Clock Tower, rising 70 feet above the rooftops, became a symbol of industrial pride, its bell calling generations to their shifts. Yet by 1963, the tower was demolished despite public protest, the first visible sign that the industrial age was slipping away. When the factory finally closed in 1980, the remaining workshops were swept aside, their foundations cleared for a retail park and business units. Today, nothing remains of the vast halls where thousands once labored. The only trace, a plaque, where the clock tower once stood. The erasure of the Singer works is total. A world-shaping factory wiped from the map, its memory left to local archives and fading photographs. Here, the story of Clydebank is not just one of industrial triumph, but of how easily even the most significant workplaces can be obliterated when their economic purpose ends. Coal Brookdale Ironworks marks the birthplace of the modern Iron Age. In 1709, Abraham Darby's breakthrough using coke instead of charcoal to smelt iron transformed the very foundations of industry. This single act, carried out in the Shropshire Valley, made it possible to produce iron at a scale and cost that would fuel the railways, bridges, and machines of the coming centuries. The Iron Bridge, completed in 1779 just downstream from the works, stands as the world's first cast iron bridge, a triumph now enshrined as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Each year, around 500,000 visitors come to see this symbol of British ingenuity, walking the span that once promised a future of limitless progress. Yet the surrounding ironworks, the forges and foundries where the real work happened, tell a more complicated story. While the iron bridge gleams with careful conservation, much of the industrial fabric that made it possible has slipped into quiet decay. The Iron Bridge Gorge Museum Trust has fought to preserve what it can, launching a $30 million conservation program, but many original structures remain vulnerable. Roof timbers rotting, stonework crumbling, the marks of centuries fading from view. Here, the paradox of British heritage is laid bare. The world celebrates the visible monuments, but the places where ordinary men and women labored are left to deteriorate. Coal Brookdale's legacy is both pride and warning, a site that changed history. Now, caught between global recognition and local neglect, its future is uncertain as the iron it once poured. 8th place, the Robert Fletcher Paper Mill in Oldham, stands as a silent witness to the quiet disappearance of Britain's everyday industrial heritage. For more than a century, this anonymous mill produced paper that found its way into schools, offices, and homes across the country. Its machines hummed through 2 world wars and the rise and fall of the British Empire. Yet its story remains almost entirely absent from the official record. When the mill closed its doors in the mid-1970s, there was no campaign for preservation, no listing to protect its brick shells or iron beams. The site slipped into dereliction, its windows smashed, floors flooded and walls slowly crumbling beneath the weight of neglect. Today saplings push through the concrete. And rainwater pools where workers once stood at the vats. Local planning files record structural failure and encroaching vegetation but little else. Unlike the celebrated monuments of British industry, the Fletcher Mill is not a museum or a destination. It is simply left to rot, unlisted and unremarked. Here the scale of loss is measured not in grand gestures, but in the slow attrition of memory. The decay of the Fletcher Mill is not unique. It is emblematic of hundreds of such sites across the country. Factories that shaped daily life now vanishing without trace. In the story of Britain's industrial past, it is these ordinary places and their silent erasure that reveal the true breadth of national neglect. Middleport pottery stands as a rare beacon of survival in Britain's industrial landscape. A Victorian factory not only preserved, but still alive with the craft that made it famous. Built in 1888 on the banks of the Trent and Mersey Canal, Middleport was designed for efficiency and light. Its red brick workshops arranged around a central courtyard to maximize production. Here the tissue transfer technique, once at the cutting edge of ceramic decoration, remains in daily use, connecting present-day potters to generations past. By the early 2000s, however, the site faced the same fate as so many others, with declining orders, leaking roofs and the threat of demolition. The end seemed inevitable until the Prince's Regeneration Trust intervened, securing $5 million from the Heritage Lottery Fund in 2015. This rescue was not just about saving bricks and mortar but about reviving a living tradition. Today Middleport operates as a working museum and active factory with skilled artisans producing ceramics for global export and local apprentices learning side by side. Community rooms, artist studios and visitor tours fill the site with new energy, drawing more than 50,000 people each year. Middleport's story offers a practical model for how industrial heritage can serve both economy and community, a counterpoint to the narrative of loss. Where so many factories have been gutted or erased, Middleport proves that with vision and investment, the places where ordinary people worked can once again become the heart of local life. In the 10th place, Quarry Bank Mill at Styles stands as Britain's most complete industrial survivor, a rare example of a factory preserved not as a ruin or a luxury development, but as a living record of the Industrial Revolution. Built in 1783 by Samuel Gregg, this vast water-powered cotton mill and its adjoining worker village formed a self-contained industrial community, powered by the River Boyne and governed by the rhythms of shift work and the seasons. Unlike so many other sites, Quarry Bank was spared the fate of abandonment or demolition. In 1939, the Gregg family gifted the entire estate to the National Trust, making it one of the earliest and most ambitious acts of industrial preservation in Britain. Over the decades more than $12 million has been invested in conservation, restoring not just the machinery and mill pond but also the apprentice house where generations of child laborers lived, worked and left behind a meticulous archive of hardship and hope. Today visitors can walk the factory floor, explore the mill owner's house and read the records of children sent from London workhouses to toil in the spinning rooms. Quarry Bank's survival is not an accident. It is the result of public stewardship, determined fundraising and a belief that the history of ordinary working people is worth saving. Here the gold standard of preservation stands in quiet contrast to the many sites where only fragments remain. As the list closes, Quarry Bank Mill leaves the question hanging. If this place can be saved, why have so many others been left to decay? Across all 10 factories, one very clear pattern continues. Britain once built the